Next, if we think of pottery, what kind of work has been done so far? Pottery, we see that again, Neolithic, Southern Neolithic, basically two main types are categorized, like the redware and the greyware. But there are variations of this, and in the excavation at Vodkal in Raichur, these variations are coming up. More interesting work can happen if we look at if we compare the different kinds of pottery, their variations, and if we try to understand the clay sources from which these different wares were made. From there, one can make out if there was a communication between these different localities, what was the nature of communication, for which the archaeological representation is in pottery throughout the Southern Neolithic, as well as the relationship between northern sites in the Northern Neolithic, north of the Vindhyas, and the Southern Neolithic cultures. Because sometimes what archaeologists do, when they see similar wares, similar forms, in two distant places, two distant sites, they draw a conclusion, they draw some kind of connection. To draw upon these connections, to build upon these connections, to see whether there was widespread interaction between these different communities, one needs to do more scientific work with samples of pottery as well as clay sources, etc. Now, a lot of beads have also been found. Metal, surprisingly, has not been found so much in the Southern Neolithic cultures. In the Northern Neolithic cultures, in some places, copper has been found. Very, very raw variety of copper, not the kind that you're finding in the Chalcolithic. Now, and this copper that I just mentioned has been found in Kanishkapur, a site which I talked about when I talked of northwestern Indian Neolithic. Now, Southern Neolithic, absolutely no trace whatsoever. Very interesting paleopathological studies have been done on skeletal remains, trying to understand what diseases afflicted these people, and archaeozoological studies, trying to understand the beginnings of domestication. Like if the evidence so far has been chiefly of cattle pastoralism, whether there has been a bias in our study. Why just cattle? Weren't other species sort of domesticated? These are certain queries, and these are certain lines of inquiry which can propel us to further investigations. So we see from this very brief review of Neolithic cultures in the Indian subcontinent that in South Asia, why I'm saying South Asia is because I included Balochistan. We are finding varied patterns of this very, very important stage in man's life, in human civilization. Varied patterns, varied representation in the archaeological assemblage, and the diversity from which we can understand the diversity of ways of life. Still more work is required, still more regions need to be highlighted. Like I just mentioned, Eastern India, especially Bengal and parts of the Northeast, parts of Orissa. Not only that, not only are new regions, they require to come under excavations and more detailed study, but also we have to be more introspective. We have to ask more detailed questions about how basically this is the time that we are seeing a development, just the beginning of the development of a social hierarchy. So how do we relate the archaeological evidence to this? How do we relate the archaeological evidence to social organization? Because on many occasions we are finding a whole lot of archaeological evidence, very, very colorful archaeological evidence. But sometimes what is lacking in the excavation reports is a more introspective understanding of the relationship of social organization to archaeological evidence, how far archaeological evidence can throw light on this.